Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be talking about some Bernice Summerfield, and we have Volume 2 of The Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, which is The Triumph of Sutekh. This was actually sent to me by one of my subscribers, Robert. I really appreciate Robert sending this. I've enjoyed listening to it. Today we're going to talk about the final part, Part 4, and I'll talk about the story as a whole. I have reviewed Parts 1, 2, and 3 already. I like this box set, by the way. The art is really nice. Got 4 individual CDs in there. Now, Part 4 is the Tears of Isis. And it kind of wraps up the story. And once again, like every chapter of this story, I feel like there's something missing in between. Because each chapter of this story is drastically different. And very tonally different. Kind of like the Keys of Marinus, where each episode is its own kind of thing. The Key to Time, kind of, as well, but the Keys of Marinus really fits where each individual episode is its own thing, and they're just, each episode is kind of going into the next one, but each episode is almost its own adventure. This is kind of like that too, where each episode is its own thing, and sometimes I feel like I'm missing something happening in between them. My favorite of the 4 was Part 1. I really like Part 1, which is on Mars in one of the pyramids. It actually kind of has a pyramid with a Mars feel to it. It has the mummies, the mummy that lies, the mummy of truth, and one of them is damaged, one of them is working, and Bernice doesn't know if it's the lying one or the truth one, so she doesn't know whether to trust it or not. The doctor has been possessed by Sutekh, because a fan theory I had, I mentioned this in my Empire of Death review, because I did not like Empire of Death. It was very underwhelming, very, very underwhelming. And definitely not a worthy successor to Pyramids of Mars. To be fair, Pyramids of Mars is one of the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time. It's hard to do a sequel that would be on its level. But Empire of Death is just it's just abysmally bad. It's very deflating, as one of my subscribers put it. And I mentioned when I was talking about Empire of Death, either in that review or another video where I brought it up, that I had much better ideas that would have worked, and one of mine was that in Pyramids of Mars, it was just Sutekh's body that died, but his spirit lived on, and that his spirit was able to escape somehow. Maybe some scientist accidentally hacked into the corridor, thinking they discovered something, and his spirit escaped and took possession of one of the scientists. That was kind of my fan theory. And that Sutekh wasn't at full power because, they're possessing a body of a human. Sutekh is possessing the body of a human. So it would be slowly building up its power, kind of like the Findal, an image of the Findal, with it taking possession of Thea. And so I think Robert caught on to that, and he sent me this, because this kind of happens, especially in Part 1, where Sutekh's essence survives and possesses the Doctor. But we don't get how. We kind of get thrown into the middle of the mix, with the Doctor being possessed, trying to fight it. And Gabriel Wolfe is back, of course, who voiced Sutekh in the original Pyramids of Mars, and voices Sutekh in Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death as well. The only good thing about Empire of Death. I love that they brought Gabriel Wolfe back. Man's 91 years old. And he voices Sutekh here. He is phenomenal throughout this whole piece. He's just, as Sutekh, he's just fantastic. He just has this chilling voice. He is absolutely phenomenal. I do like Sylvester McCoy in this as well. I like Lisa, and we also have Ace in here, and Sophie's good as Ace. So I'm enjoying the performances. And Part 1 ends with the Doctor basically dying. And then we get to Part 2 when there's a gap. Part 2 is like on Earth when they're trying to find, I can't remember if it's the Eye of Horus or whatever it is. They're after like an artifact. I think it's the Eye of Horus. So it becomes kind of this like national treasure hunt. Like this treasure hunt, and kind of like a heist movie deal with Ace, because Ace shows up at the end of Part 1. And then Bernice, and then this other woman whose name I can't remember, that they meet there, and they're all traveling together trying to track down the artifact, which culminates with them meeting Isis at the end, and the Doctor showing up, and then Bernice getting teleported, and Isis saying some stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then Part 3 jumps into this totally other area where I feel like I'm missing something, where she's in ancient Egypt. And there's a woman king pharaoh. It's a sci-fi show, why not? And then Sutekh somehow has a body here. We'll get back to that. As an old man who basically is like Emperor Palpatine in this, talking to the prince, who is the Pharaoh's stepson, I think. And basically the prince is Anakin, and the Sutekh convinces him to turn against the woman, king, and the Doctor is somehow the architect of all of this, but he doesn't remember who Bernice is because part of his brain is inside the woman king. You have to listen to it. It's very timey-wimey. And then part 4 takes place in this manor house by these devotees of Sutekh who worship Sutekh, because for some reason people always are like, the evil one, yeah, let's worship him. How can that go wrong? And so it's really hard to explain. It's not that I dislike it, it's just that it gets progressively not as good. Part 1 was my favorite part, and then part 2 was my second favorite, and then part 3 it kind of started losing me. And then part 4, while still being miles better than Empire of Death, still is a little anticlimactic, except for the actual ending, which I'll get to. I like the actual ending. Part 4 itself honestly doesn't do a lot for me. It's a little confusing in places. I do like that it gives me some nice character, I won't say character growth. It gives me a chance to learn more about Bernice's characters. I'm not very familiar with Bernice Summerfield, honestly. I haven't listened to a lot of her stuff, so it gives me a chance to really learn about who she is as a character, as a person. So I like that. And in it, McCoy, it's really weird because McCoy's doctor is acting very undoctor-like, where he's acting like, no, we have to get away, we're going to die, stop going, you're foolish, we don't have time to save her, we got to leave. Very cowardly almost, and I was like, this is not the Doctor. This definitely doesn't sound like the 7th Doctor, until I started clicking in my head, he's got to be putting on an act, he's got to be doing some Chess Master McCoy stuff here, because that's just not the Doctor, especially the 7th Doctor, which it turns out that's exactly what it is. He's putting on an act. This story's kind of like The Hand of Fear Part 4, because The Hand of Fear I've talked about on the channel several times, where the first 3 episodes are really good. It kind of falls apart in Part 4, though. Part 4 is really a mess. But it gets a little saved at the ending by the actual departure of Sarah Jane. The scene when Sarah leaves the TARDIS at the end of Hand of Fear is very good. Very good. As Elizabeth and Tom improvised that, and they did it really well. And it redeems Part 4 a little bit. It's still not a good episode. It still, as I say, falls apart, and that really holds Hand of Fear down, because I'm really big on something sticking the landing. It's like I can't stand the first half of Greatest Show in the Galaxy, but that 4th episode of it's really good, so Greatest Show in the Galaxy gets a couple points up for that. Whereas Hand of Fear, since it misses the landing, it kind of drags it down for me. But like that in Hand of Fear, where while the episode kind of falls apart, but that departure scene saves it a little bit. It's kind of like that here, is where Part 4 doesn't do a lot for me. Tears of Isis doesn't do a lot for me. But I love the ending. It's really good, and how it loops everything around full circle. Because that's kind of what it does, is the ending of Part 4 leads into the beginning of Part 1, like a loop, like a, I was about to say a Mobius strip, but that's not quite right. Was it Aurora Borealis? No. A snake eating its own tail. My mind is blanking on the word I'm looking for, but like a snake eating its own tail. It's basically a circle, where at the events at the end between Sutekh and the Doctor lead into where we found it in Part 1, although Isis, because Isis, you think Isis dies, but she doesn't. She manages to grab the Doctor kind of out of that time storm or whatever and pull him out and save him, trapping Sutekh in this loop, this kind of time loop, to where he's constantly looping through, which is really interesting. And kind of reminds me of Marvel Zombies, actually, the Marvel Zombies comic. one of the ways that ended, it did sequels after that, was that one of the Watchers actually traps, because the Marvel Zombies started in one universe, like the main universe we see with like Colonel America. The outbreak started there because a zombie sentry burst through from another universe. So his universe had been destroyed already by the virus, so he burst into that particular universe and started the infection there. And then later in Marvel Zombies 2, they got rid of some of the zombies by teleporting them to a parallel universe, which we think is a third universe to be infected. But you actually find out at the end that that version of Sentry that gets infected in that second universe is the one that escapes into the other universe. So it does it in a circle. The Watcher tricks it into being a virus that devours itself. So it's just those two universes giving it to each other in a circle. It's kind of like that story here, where Sutekh gets trapped in this circle, but the Doctor got pulled out by ISIS. And that's a pretty cool little twist ending I like. I didn't see that coming. But it does explain why I mentioned in my review of part 1, it felt weird starting in the beginning of a mystery. I felt like there was a whole part of the story I was missing. It's just because I didn't get it until part 4. And I do like the fact that the Doctor did do some clever Chessmaster McCoy stuff at the end, where of course you find out he's manipulating it far more than he was letting on, by moving the time period that Sutekh thought he was in to a part where Earth had already been just destroyed by natural cause, the 29th century, which Classic Who has mentioned several times. Earth's not in good shape around that time. So, all in all, I enjoyed this story far more than The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death. I very much appreciate Robert sending it, because it's a much better sequel for Sutekh. That being said, it does progressively get less interesting to me. Part 1 is the best part. I really enjoyed it. Part 2 was still good. You started losing me at part 3. Part 4 I didn't really care for. It was just kind of, until that ending. I did like that ending a lot, so that saves it a little bit. It is something I can see myself eventually re-listening to. It probably wouldn't be for a considerable while, but I could see myself going back to it, especially now that I have the foreknowledge of what's going on. I might could appreciate certain things in it more. I did like the performances. Those were nice, although I think the Woman King in part 3 and Bernice sound a little too much alike for me. At times, I think I got a little confused there. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I think there's some 4th Doctor stories with Sutekh too in Big Finish. I need to listen to those at some point. I'm curious to see if those are any good or not. So, The Adventures of Bernice Summerfield, Volume 2, The Triumph of Sutekh. Have you listened to it? What do you think of it? Do you actually think Sutekh needs a sequel? Or do you think Pyramids of Mars was a good one-off for him and that should have been his end? Do you like my idea and this story's idea of maybe his body was destroyed but his spirit survived and it escaped somehow? Because I like that idea. I do like that idea. I want to know what you think. Comment down below. Let's talk about it. Don't forget all the other fun stuff as well. Links to the Patreon down in the description. Links to the Amazon wishlist, the Amazon UK wishlist, the P.O. boxes down there as well. I want to give a shout out to Sam Venning and Colin Coney, 2 of my top tier patrons. I really appreciate their support and the support of all of my patrons. It very much does make a difference and it's much appreciated. And my YouTube members as well. Most importantly, thank you for watching.